Okay, so someone came into my classroom, and so I had to stop it prematurely. So we'll keep on. So tree roots help soak up water, and so if you don't have the tree roots there, it can help encourage flooding in the area where you are. So harvesting trees. So remembering that harvesting, remembering that harvesting means to collect or gather. So the first step in forest management is to build roads for access and timber removal. So if you want to get to a group of, these are trees that are over here, right? You want to get to the forest that's over here. And, there's some, forest all the way here, but this is where the main road is. That's a truck. Imagine it's a truck, right? If you want to get to there, you have to clear a path that's going to get you there, right? So the first step of forest management is to build roads that's going to get you to the forest that you want to get to. So there are harmful effects of that, very similar to what we spoke about with deforestation on the previous slide, right? As mentioned here. Okay. So there are three major harvesting methods that we'll talk about for trees. So the first one is selective cutting. I know that's really small. I'll rewrite it here. And it's just what it sounds like. Instead of, you're going to go in there into a forest and just collect a small amount of trees, right? One or two, every fifth tree, every third tree, all the older trees, right? So they'll go by a certain age, all the trees of a certain height, things like that. The other one is clear cutting, which exactly is, what it sounds like. You clear cut. Everything is gone. You might have stubs left out, but all the trees are gone. And then finally is strip cutting. And strip cutting, very similar to what we think of, strip cropping, right? Is that you just get rid of them strip by strip, right? So you have your cut one, which is a year ago. You have your dirt road. This was cut, you know, this area right here is really small to see, but this area right here was cut 3 to 10 years ago, and this area was uncut. This top area was uncut, right? And in the middle you have this dirt road. And so we see that a lot of times too, especially, if you're going to places that are mountainous or hilly, right? And you're driving, you see that there's land up there, but your road is just right here. So that would be strip cutting. So disadvantages and advantages of clear cutting. So this slide, just keep in mind that this slide is specific to clear cutting. And so I don't really need to read them, but you can see high timber yield. So remember, yields is what you get out. Right, it's your product. And so you get the maximum profit in the shortest time. So instead of waiting for trees to mature, if you just wipe them all out in one felt swoop, you get them all. You get the maximum profit from that area. Okay. You can reforest with fast-growing trees. Short time to establish new stand of trees. Requires less skill, right? Because all you have to do is just go with the truck and knock them all down. So you don't have to say, okay, this is a good one, this is this old. You don't have to identify age, things like that. Need less time. Oh yeah, less skill in planting. I said that. And good for tree species needing full or moderate sunlight. So if you select cut, right, and you're here, right, and maybe this is the tree that needs sunlight, or all of them, right? Trees that grow back together in groups don't necessarily get maximum sunlight because they're all competing for the sun that's up here, right? It's a little sad looking. And then disadvantages here, which are pretty self-explanatory. So solutions to sustainable forestry, right? Remember, just like the previous slide, this is good information for FRQ. Identify and protect forests high in biodiversity, grow more timber, long rotations, etc., etc. I don't need to read them, right? This is very similar to the water. Include ecological forests, the services in estimating their economic value. So when you're charging for the logs that people are using to build houses or for whatever else they're using it for, then the price should take into account the services that the forests are offering. So next we'll talk about forest resources and management in the United States. So how the forests are are managed. Okay, so the resources and how they're managed. So there's encouraging news in 1920, right? We were having more of a wood crisis, right? And so now we have forests that cover more area than they did in 1920. More wood is grown than cut, and the country has set aside large areas of protected forest. However, the clear-cut areas often replaced with, it should be often replaced with tree farms, so not a forest, but a tree farm, so very similar to a farm. So you're selling the trees, so the trees aren't going to make a forest, right? You're selling enough to them to grow. There are decreases in biodiversity and ecosystem processes that are disrupted. So one way that forests can be managed is through fires. And one of the, everyone thinks of, Smokey Bear, only you can prevent forest fires, right? And so the issue, though, is that there are some forest fires that are that just happen on their own and are necessary for the forest to occur, right? There are some species of trees and plants whose seeds are only released through the extreme heat caused by a fire. And we'll watch a video and answer some questions about that to go into more detail. So you have three different types. You have surface fires. You have crown fires, and crown, just like what it sounds like, may start on the ground, but eventually burn the whole trees and leap from treetop to treetop. They're leaping from the crown of the tree. And then you have ground fires, surface fires that go underground and may burn partially decayed leaves or peat. And that's common in North Carolina. I'm sorry. It's not common in North Carolina. Common in northern peat bogs, okay? And so this is sort of peat bogs are sort of like swampy areas, right? That's what I think of when I think of peat bogs. So controversy over fire management, right? So the whole, only you can prevent forest fires. Do we want it to happen? So to reduce fire damage, the recommendation is to set controlled surface fires, to allow them to burn on public lands if they don't threaten life, property, and clear small areas around property subject to fire. So if this area right here is subject to fire, then you just may not want to sell land for any type of, use a certain proximity from the area, the hot area, the surface fire area. So in 2003, U.S. Congress passed the Healthy Forest Restoration Act, which allows timber companies to cut large trees in 71% of national forests. So now they don't have to worry. They're not in the forest. They have to deal with in the regular forest. They're in the national forest, right, which tend to be a little bit more protected. In return, they must clear away smaller, more fire-prone trees and underbrush. Some forest science believe this could increase severe fires by removing resistant trees and leaving highly flammable slash, right? So if there are more fire-prone trees and underbrush, right, they're saying these are the things that encourage fire. So if you get rid of them, the fire won't be encouraged. It doesn't have that ignition to keep going. So logging in a U.S. national forest. So the trade-offs of doing that. So logging is just the act of moving wood from the stump to somewhere outside the forest. Okay, so you have your advantages and your disadvantages. I don't think we need to go through them, but you should read over them. If you don't understand one of them, you should come to class ready to ask those questions. So solutions to reducing damage for harvested trees. Improve the efficiency of wood use. So inefficient use of construction materials, excess packing, overuse of junk mail. Like every day I get this these papers in the mail with sales papers from different stores and stuff that I don't want. I put them straight into recycling. And so those are trees being wasted because nobody wants that stuff. Okay, inadequate paper recycling, not doing it at all, and failure to reuse wood shipping containers. So you know how sometimes they have those wood containers that look like this? They have this sort of basket weave shape on it. So if you don't reuse them right, you just cut them, throw them out when they couldn't be reused. That's wasted. Reducing the waste of wood and paper products by only 4% could eliminate the need to remove any timber from national forests. So only 4%, right? Which is a really small percentage. It's everyone in the country doing a little bit different, right? When it comes to getting their using paper. Make more paper by using a fiber that does not come from trees. So rice straw or the kinaf plant, right? So these are alternatives to trees, but they still make paper. Can't spell the word. Oh my goodness. Okay. So now we're going to move into tropical deforestation. So more specific about tropical. We were talking about more temperate forests before, and so now we'll talk more about tropical. So tropical forests cover about 6% of the Earth's land area. Large areas of tropical rainforest and tropical dry forests are rapidly being cut off in parts of South America, Africa, and Southeast Asia. Okay, so why is this happening? Making room for cattle ranching, large plantation of growing crops and soybeans used for cattle feed, right? So this whole idea of food for the growing population. That should say population. It's hard to write in this on this thing. Oops, wrong way. Okay, so why should we care about it? It's estimated that 80% of the world's people rely on traditional medicines, most derived from natural plants and forests. They also provide chemicals used as blueprints for making some of the world's prescription drugs, right? So so we need them. So while they're only 6%, right, covering the land, 80% of the world's rely on that small percentage of 6%. So we should take care of them. So causes of deforestation and degradation, these are the basic causes. And these basic causes can lead to the secondary causes. Hence the name secondary. So what can we do to reduce tropical deforestation? So debt for nature swaps. So this is very similar to what we talked about last class or last chapter, where someone's getting something out of protecting it, right? And so participating countries act as custodians of protected forest reserves, and in return for foreign aid or debt relief, right? So if there's a country in trouble, they say, oh, well, we'll protect our forests for XYZ, and then they could lose some of that. So conservation concession, nations are paid for concessions that preserve their resources. So if you are doing things that help preserve or lessen the degradation of the forest that's by you, then you'll get paid for that, right? You'll get paid to do that. Okay, concessions are kind of like a break or right, a method or a plan. All right, and there are a couple things. I don't know why these were left empty, but I'm just gonna type it in here, and then you guys can have it. I think it'll work this way. Yeah. So loggers can use gentler methods for harvesting trees, and those methods can include cutting canopy vines, right? And so if you cut the canopy vines, when the tree goes timber, it doesn't take all the vines or the canopies or other things to help that could degrade the tree species that are being left behind. They can also use the least obstructed path to remove the logs, right? And so by doing that, then you're again cutting down on the amount of disturbance that you give, because you're in a different place, right? I mean, you're going through a place that's less crowded, so you're not hitting or bumping or disturbing other trees or organisms that may be there. Another one is that governments and individuals can mount efforts to reforest and rehabilitate degraded areas. And then finally, for this last box, you can also clamp down on illegal logging. Right, so people coming up and taking trees from places that they don't need to be, or different things like that. Next slide. So these are solutions: prevention, restoration. So prevent, right? This should act as our number one if you can. If there's already a place that's undisturbed, we want to start with our prevention. But what we recognize is that oftentimes we catch it after it's too late, and we have to move to the restoration side, or cleanup is what we talked about in earlier times. Okay, so I'm going to come back and do grasslands on another video, so this isn't too long of a video.